I'm Kat with a C.
And I'm Kat with a K, and this is Two Cats in a Movie Review. Kat, you're back! How is your grand adventure going?
Things are shaping up nicely, but more on that another time. Instead, let's get down to our new surprise. In light of the fact that a majority of movies are based off of books, we thought it would be super fun to compare books to their movie adaptations.
And we're going to begin with one of my favorite books, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. He wrote it in 1895 at the height of the Industrial Revolution and on the cusp of a new century. So here's the synopsis from Goodreads. I've had a most amazing time. So begins the time traveler's astonishing first-hand account of his journey 800,000 years beyond his own era. And the story that launched H.G. Wells' successful career and earned him his reputation as the father of science fiction. With a spectacular leap that still fires the imagination, Wells sends his brave explorer to face a future burdened with our greatest hopes and our darkest fears. A pull of the time machine lever propels him in the age of a slowly dying Earth. There he discovers two bizarre races, the ethereal Eloi and the subterranean Morlocks. I shudder. Who not only symbolize the duality of human nature, but offer a terrifying portrait of the men of tomorrow as well. Okay, so as I mentioned before, The Time Machine is one of my favorite books. See my giant H.G. collection? He's a great writer, and he's very inventive, because you have to remember H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine in 1895, at the height of the Industrial Revolution. I know I said this before, but I needed to say it again so you can get the picture and the mindset of the man. He was he was a broad thinker, even though he was an interesting thinker. He comes up with some very interesting life philosophies in his books, but they still manage to capture us today. And one of those reasons I think that they capture us today is because he considered his books sci-fi romance. And it's not because he wrote love stories or love scenes. I think that he considered them sci-fi romance because of his romance with science. And usually his characters' romance with science, especially in this one. The Time Machine is very much, the time traveler is very much romanced by the whole idea of science and science leading the way. And that's really why he builds the time machine, and that's why he's like, let's go into the future and see what's going on, and won't men be amazing and great? And H.G. Wells gave us this really interesting point of view of the fact that, wait a minute, what if 800,000 years from now, humankind has evolved into something different? Because he does base this on the theory of evolution. Or is even headed towards extinction. This was something that somebody who in, 1895 was really thinking about this, because he didn't know where the machines would take us, and they were on the cusp of the new century, the 1900s, right there around the corner. So he put it into his book. And it's a really good book. It's written wonderfully. It's really easy to visualize what's going on in the book. He does it effortlessly. I don't know how he manages to do this. He just managed to describe everything without using verbose language, but still very easily you can picture this in your mind. What's going on being 800,000 years into the future with giant Greek statues and big buildings that some of them are crumbling, and they're all like made out of amazing craftsmanship of marble, with all these little Eloi running around in tunics and frolicking. It's very fun. And then, seriously, the most terrifying book. No, do not read this book before bed. It only takes, it's a novella, so it only takes about 4 hours to read, according to my iBooks audiobook that Kelsey Grammer was reading. which was a really good version, or you can get it on Audible. But don't read this before bed. I know it only takes 4 hours, but do this in a brightly lit room, because when H.G. Wells describes the time traveler, it's really a time traveler describes going down into the earth and encountering the Morlocks for the first time, I was doing this and just breathing heavy because it really was terrifying. That's how well written this book is, because you're reading it and being terrified. Another cool thing about this book is that there are very few names. The time traveler, the main character, has no name, so it makes it really easy to put yourself in his place. And that being said, it's also really great because it's just one big question of what's going to happen to humankind. It's a great book to adapt to screen. And on that note, let's dive into the first book to screen adaptation.
For our first movie adaptation, we have H.G. Wells' The Time Machine in 1960. It stars Rod Taylor, Alan Young, and Yvette Mimieux, and you can rent it on Prime. Here today, gone tomorrow. When George sits at the controls of his new creation, he has all the time in the world. He's invented a time machine that whisks him from 1899 to war-ravaged moments of the 20th century and far off in the future into the year 802,701. In this far-off era, passive Eloi face the grim future as the prey for the glow-eyed subterranean Morlocks, unless this time-traveling stranger can intervene. So, I'm a huge Rod Taylor fan. Yes, big Rod Taylor fan, and he does an excellent job, as well as the rest of the cast. The makeup for the Morlocks is pretty good, but of course, looking at what we have today, it's fun to watch what they could do then. And the matte paintings in the film are simply impeccable. The look and feel of it is all really great. They did an excellent job interpreting what they had to go off of in the books. And the comparisons from the book to the movie, all the little details that were kept, like her falling in the river and nobody caring, and then him saving her, and them being attacked by Morlocks at night and setting things on fire, and yeah, just really great comparisons there. In fact, I would say that it's pretty much a 90% well done adaptation from the book in terms of the details. And what's cool is that in the book, the motivation is science for the time traveler and discovery, but in the movie, George's focus is science, of course, but his real focus is hoping that at some point in the future, man will have evolved past the need for weapons of mass destruction. And that's what he's really searching for. And another cool thing that we like is that in the book, the Eloi are these tiny little creatures kind of akin to hobbits, but in the movie, you needed just a little bit of romance going on there, and that's why you changed the way the Eloi looked, and it really worked for on screen. The changes that they did make were really so that visually things would be more stunning, and adding more depth to the characters made them more relatable. So all in all, we give The Time Machine in 1960 5 out of 5 paws.
Ooh, so now for our second movie adaptation, it's The Time Machine from 2002, starring Guy Pearce, Jeremy Irons, and Mark Addy. So it was an eclectic group. I liked them. So here's the plot. Hoping to alter the events of the past, a 19th century inventor instead travels 800,000 years into the future, where he finds humankind divided into two warring races. All right. So that might sound a little different than the previous adaptation and even the book, the plot. So they kept about 50% of the original story and some of its details in this adaptation. It's still a brilliant adaptation because, like I said, about 15%. So they keep the bones and some very interesting details, but pretty much change all the window dressing. We had to give a catalyst, just the way that they were writing the story. So the catalyst, whereas in the book, the catalyst for the time traveler to create the time machine is just his want of knowledge. Well, the catalyst in the film is the fact that the time traveler, who has a name, Alexander's fiance dies the night he's going to propose to her. So he wants to go back and save her, which of course is a paradox because without the time machine, he can't go back in the past, but he wouldn't create the time machine if she hadn't died. And he figures this out. Well, actually, he doesn't figure this out. He actually goes to the future to figure out why he can't change the past. He doesn't intend on going that far, which in the book, the original time traveler did not intend to go 800,000 years into the future. He was afraid to stop. In the movie, he goes that far because of another cataclysmic event, which again, we needed a reason for why the species split into the Eloi and the Morlocks, which was really nice because in the book, the time traveler discusses the fact that there had to be some kind of cataclysmic event to separate them and drive some underground and leave some above. And he also talks a lot about the class system. You know, the upper worlders, the Elois being the upper class, and then the underworlder Morlocks being the lower class. But that's just how H.G. Wells was thinking. So in the movie, the 2002 movie, the cataclysmic event is that we are progressing far too fast. And it's even posed. Mark Addy's character, Philby, asked the question, do you think we'll ever go too far? And we get that answered in the film as well, because we blow up the moon, basically. And that's what causes all of this destruction and the separation and creating two separate humanoid species. Whereas, so I say humanoid because in the book, the Eloi look a lot like the Lollipop Gang munchkins from The Wizard of Oz. They've got egg-shaped heads with little tufts of hair on top, and I thought it was really interesting in the movie that they chose to make them, well, honestly, to make the Eloi just primitive. It's not the fact that they can't speak English. It's not a fact that they are, lethargic and just playful little creatures, whereas in the book, they are. The time traveler says they're like 5-year-olds, they're short, they're just all about play, they have no cares, they're cattle. It's how they act. They act like a whole bunch of sheep, that they just do what they do, and that's just every day is a pleasure, and they don't do anything that's difficult. In fact, the time traveler in the book has trouble learning the Eloi's language because they get tired of trying to teach him. In the movie, the Eloi are just primitive. They don't have machines. They have their own language. They even have schools. So this is where I have a difference. Weena is the Eloi in the book that, well, the time traveler has a relationship with, and he even says that, well, maybe it's kind of romantic on her side, but not really on his. He just cares about her a lot. He cares about all of them, actually, as he learns things as he progresses. But, we created that romance. So I said when we were reviewing the book that H.G. Wells considers his book sci-fi romance, and this movie just really took that romance to a different level of giving him a love interest. In Mara is our Eloi in the 2002 version, and she's a teacher. And they actually learn English, which of course was helpful for us because we all speak English, and we don't speak Eloi. And the other change is in the book, the Morlocks, terrifying creatures that they are, they kind of look more like apes, Where in this 2002 version of the Time Machine, to me, they remind me a lot in how they look, move, and act like the Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings. They're built, most of them, except for Jeremy Irons' character, who's like in charge of all the Morlocks in his area. Most of them look kind of human, but with like deformed... Okay, seriously, they look a lot like werewolves. And the big thing is in this one, they diverged a lot where the Morlock exist entirely in darkness. They see in the dark, and that's what makes them terrifying, because the Eloi are terrified of the dark. Well, we don't really do that in... Well, we kind of do that in the new one, but we took away the fact that the Morlocks exist completely in the dark. They have big churning fires all the time. Like I said, they remind me of the Uruk-hai. And they come out during the day, whereas during the day is actually when the Eloi are the safest, and they hate it at night, especially on a new moon, because that's the hunting schedule. So I thought that was an interesting change on both sides. I'm trying to think if there's any other like big change. It's still a really great adaptation. It really, really is a great adaptation. They kept the heart of the book. Like, one of the weird details that they kept pulling through this is that Weena in the book is fascinated with the time traveler's pockets. So she thinks they're vases and keeps putting flowers in his pockets. And he actually comes back to the future, not to the future, to the past of his time with those flowers because they're just still in his pockets. Well, in the movie, Alexander, the time traveler, has promised his fiancée flowers. And then he's forgotten to get her flowers. And then when we're talking with Mara one of the first times, she wants to go pick flowers with him. And that's kind of a touchy subject. So I thought that was an interesting detail to pull through. Here's another really cool thing. So Alan Young plays the character of Philby in the 1960 version of The Time Machine. And he makes a cameo appearance as a florist in the 2002 version. And I thought that was a very interesting cameo placement. Now, I'm sure I've left out all kinds of different comparisons. So you can make your own comparison by watching this film, The Time Machine 2002, on Prime. And we give The Time Machine 2002 4 out of 5 paws.
We hope you enjoyed our show. Please let us know what you thought in the comments below.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and share.
And until next time, keep searching for that perfect pick.